Welcome back to another Sports Speed Insider video, and today we are going to continue with the theme of understanding the learn, load and execute principle and applying this to change of direction non-linear sprinting activities. So framework 8, sorry, of the system, it discovers and discusses non-linear sprinting, okay, as an action rather than change of direction and agility, because the key things to understand here and remember is that what we are doing from a limb action perspective, especially in our open step and crossover patterns, is creating the same biomechanical markers from a thigh and joint angle perspective as we would do in our linear acceleration. So from that short change of direction perspective and that close quarter change of direction non-linear sprinting, then we're able to understand that everything in front of me is going to be simple, everything behind me is complex, and I want to understand the relationship between my dominant and non-dominant side. I always am a big believer of coaching the dominant side first and heavily, quite aggressively, in order to maximize the skill learning and the visualization elements, and this is where learn, load and execute comes into hand, especially when you're a team sport S&T coach and you don't actually have that much time with your athletes. You need to learn to maximize that time as best as possible, and I'm just going to give you a couple of recipes today really of how you can best serve that. And using the learn, load and execute framework, you should be well familiar of its cyclic nature, of how it feeds in and builds itself long term. So again, the identification first and foremost, if we look at the short change of directions and non-linear sprinting versus the longer, so we're looking at that acceleration biased movement, then we have in our locker, we have shuffles, we have open steps, we have full steps, we have crossovers, we have combinations of all of those. And remember, if we start at the execute end, we're always trying to understand this question: what combo? Okay, what combo are we trying to put together? Is it an open step crossover to acceleration? What are we actually trying to best serve and build this towards? Because all non-linear actions are followed or preceded with transitional movements, and then skill and sport action. And that's something we can't get away from. So we have to learn to build, and always with one ear and one eye in mind of how is this actually going to relate to our tactical speed and our special speed. Remember, this is a long-term, general, specific, special and tactical. So from a general sense, this is where we understand our learn. And as we discussed with the acceleration, we're trying to find and identify patterns that will positively train the athlete in a way of which they need to be developed. So targeting the hip capsule, targeting the hamstrings, the groins, working in that frontal plane from a specific strength perspective is going to be the best resilience tool for them. So as we break this down, we're just going to look at a couple of very simple ones today. I'm not going to spend too much time on this because you've got your exercise breakdowns in your manuals. And I want you to be able to start to practice this and keep moving. Again, Sports Speed Insider is all about fast applying education. So my first and foremost with my learn, I'm going to look to do any isolated position, okay, exposing the body to joint angles, okay, whatever we need, okay, that is what we're trying. Anything learn with regards to that, because remember, the secondary benefit for isolating these limb segments, so the wall positions, for example, is we're developing the co-contractions that are needed, and we're developing specific work capacity and that tolerance. Not that we can't get, so frontal plane, we can't get these things in heavy lunges and stuff like that, because we have to understand the nature of the way the displacement of the center of mass and the cost that that has on our athletes, and it doesn't work in a lunge variation or a lateral squat, for example, or even a step up from a specific point of view. They're still very general exercises. So our first element is our learning those positions, and again, load. We add resistance as the easiest way to go through it. And that's going to, both of these compound together are going to start to develop specific capacity. Then if I've isolated and I've highlighted that I'm going to be working on the open step, okay, I want to be able to, in my learn, I want to be focusing on, if I'm doing a wall drill, pushing with my lateral leg and my outside leg and my inside leg, the ones closest to what I want to be driving hard. I want to be creating that real active stretch in that position, to which then if I add resistance, I really want to find that and push and drive through it. To then understand the combo, is that going to become an open step to an acceleration or a crossover? We reduce that and we scale that back to run the learn, load, execute. That execution exercise then just becomes a static. I'm starting in my athletic base position and I want to put a massive open step, okay? Almost like a lateral bound, sort of, but scaled down, flat across the grass and cutting nice and wide. So we're going to create that here, the arc of the hip needs to be flatter. A lateral bound, the arc will go like this, and we want it nice and flat. We split and we open and we adjust ourselves back in there. So when understanding how we want to start to build this, remember it's a long-term process, and how we start is to understand your combos of what you want to be able to do, how you want to build, what action, look at the sport that you're working with, what action are you trying to develop better non-linear sprinting change of direction with, and how do you reverse engineer that back to its most basic form? Because if you can work that system out and you can work that process out within the athletes that you work with, you're going to be able to have it on tap all the time. And it starts from knowing this process inside out. So we've covered it for acceleration, we've covered it for maximum velocity, and we've covered it for short acceleration non-linear sprinting. Now the last thing I want to touch on is, what about when we're running faster? So we've got 3 zones of non-linear sprinting, as we've discussed, is the short, okay, the short curves. This again, if you consider the frameworks of curve loading, we've got our short curve, which has got high rates of acceleration, high decays. We've got our moderate curves, which are 20 meters or so, and then we've got our longer curves, which are 20 plus meters. So the difference in the way that they're going to look, acceleration and change of direction is going to be built. The way that we run is very different from these 3. So we've ticked this box to start off with. We have an idea of how we want to start to build things that are shorter, and how we want to start building change of direction that's a little bit shorter and more condensed. Now the fun stuff starts in this moderate zone and these longer zones. So in our moderate zone, if we take, for example, a 10 meter angular acceleration with a change of direction back in. So with a displacement here, this is the first bit of understanding the learn, load and execute. We always want to start at one point and finish on the same line with, let's look at just a 5 meter displacement over 20 meters to start off with, okay? How that's going to be, what we're going to be doing to learn, load and execute that is, first and foremost, in our learn, if we've nailed a good level of understanding with our short change of direction, we then have to add speed to that. So the learning, the drill design that you would have for your learning here is, if we're working off this situation, I've got a 5 meter displacement here, this is my gate and I need to get back through, we're going to start combining the acceleration skills, working, say that's 20 meters, that's going to be 10 over 5. 10 meters, you're going to have, again, 7 to 8 steps there. But if we cut that in half, so 4 are going to give us acceleration, and then the other 4 are going to prepare for this change of direction. So in our learn elements of this, we're going to compound the acceleration benefits. So we're going to go 4 steps, bang, 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 really hard, really fast. Then start to cognitively understand, well, how am I going to change my torso? How are we going to fit these, these basic technical models of general change of direction into this zone to then get back out, to then minimize the lost speed that you will have here to maximize it out. And that's all done in learn, okay? That is understanding the cognitive relationships between things. And then as we get into loading, there are a couple of really simple ways that you can do this. You can tandem it, so you can run in pairs, and draw this on the board. We've got our first person here, and I've done this with athletes, who's going to be holding a band, okay? And then we've got our other athlete who is changing direction and looking like he's doing that warrior pose, but that's going to be round his waist. And what the way we're going to track is this person will just be running an arch there. So as they get further displacement, it's going to put a lot of external resistance, pulling them back in, and they're going to have to work to push out. But what that's going to help with the load is it re-accelerate them through there and then run back through. So a really useful drill design that's going to help you with your athlete's load and get used to the displacement around the waist. And use bands because they're the most accessible equipment. And then the execution here can be, again, what combo are we trying to develop, but then also, can we create a race game? Can we create a chase game? How do we then start putting it under pressure following those principles? So learn, load, execute now has been covered to a base level that you'll have a really good way to apply it. And you can look forward to next week, where we start to dig inside some of the specific exercises, specializing in conjunction with your exercise demos. So we're going to start to hit home on some of the theory and intensified theory of way that you can start implementing this stuff in the gym environment as well. So enjoy that, and I'll see you on the next call.